On July 1737, Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were flying toward one of the smallest and most unforgiving targets in aviation history, Howland Island, a narrow speck in the Central Pacific. Somewhere ahead was land, somewhere below was empty ocean. And between those two facts lay one of the most enduring disappearances of the 20th century. Earhart was already world famous by then. She had crossed the Atlantic alone, broken records, and become a symbol of modern flight, technical courage, and public ambition. But fame offered no protection over the Pacific. Out there, reputation meant nothing. Distance, weather, fuel, and navigation reduced every aviator to mathematics and margin. The flight was part of Earhart's around-the-world attempt, an undertaking that had already consumed months of planning, long-range flying, and public attention on a global scale. With her was Fred Noonan, an experienced navigator whose skill mattered most when coastlines vanished and every correction depended on position, timing, and celestial judgment. Their aircraft was a Lockheed Electra 10E, modified for long distance. It was advanced for its time, but not advanced enough to remove uncertainty from thousands of miles of ocean. The plan sounds simple when reduced to a line on a map. Depart Leh, fly east, locate Howland Island, refuel, and continue. In reality, that leg was among the most difficult of the entire journey. Howland was tiny, low, and isolated. It did not rise from the sea like a mountain or announce itself with a harbor skyline. It had to be found with precision. Earhart and Noonan left Leh on the morning of July 30, 1937. Ahead of them stretched more than 2,000 miles of water and a schedule with very little room for error. On paper, the flight was difficult but manageable. In practice, long-range navigation could be steadily undermined by wind drift, radio limitations, visibility problems, and cumulative small mistakes. That is what makes the final leg so haunting. Nothing in it required a single dramatic failure. A chain of ordinary problems may have been enough. Far ahead, the Coast Guard cutter Itasca waited near Howland Island to assist with communication and navigation, a small human point of reference in an enormous oceanic field. The ship's role seems reassuring in retrospect. Someone would be there, signals would be exchanged, bearings would be taken, the aircraft would arrive, refuel, and move on. But radio communication in 1937 was not seamless. Frequencies, timing, reception quality, and direction finding all depended on conditions that could break down when precision mattered most. As the hours passed, Earhart moved farther from her last confirmed point on land and deeper into a part of the world where there were no visual corrections to rely on. The closer the aircraft came to Howland, the more important every estimate became. A slight error made early could become a serious miss by the end of the flight. Earhart's later radio calls suggested growing difficulty. The aircraft seemed near Howland, yet the island remained unseen, and contact with the Itasca was not working as cleanly as hoped. That is one of the central tensions in the mystery. They may have been close enough to matter, but not close enough to survive the difference. One famous transmission reported, "We must be on you, but cannot see you," followed by concern that fuel was running low. It is one of the most chilling lines in aviation history. Another message indicated they were flying along a north-south line, suggesting a search pattern after failing to visually identify the island at the expected position. None of that meant the aircraft was doomed at once, but it did mean the planned arrival had already become a problem-solving exercise under growing pressure. Every extra minute in search of Howland consumed fuel. Every course correction risked widening uncertainty. And every failed radio exchange deepened the gap between aircraft and ship. By the time the last confirmed transmissions were received, the flight had entered that most dangerous state in exploration history, close enough to hope, but not close enough to recover. Then the radio fell silent. No confirmed landing followed. No confirmed wreckage was recovered. And the Pacific, which had offered no answer during the flight, kept offering none afterward. The disappearance triggered a massive search effort. Aircraft and ships combed the ocean, driven by urgency, public attention, and the simple refusal to accept that such a famous flight could end without trace. Yet the scale of the Pacific worked against certainty. Even a determined search could miss debris, miss oil, miss wreckage, and miss the final location by many miles. As days passed without a result, the mystery hardened. What had first seemed like a delay became a disappearance, and then a permanent absence. The official explanation developed early and has remained the most widely accepted. Earhart and Noonan likely missed Howland, ran low on fuel, and crashed into the sea. It is not the most dramatic theory, but it is the one most consistent with the final transmissions, the geography of the route, and the brutal arithmetic of fuel. That explanation also carries a particular sadness. It suggests not a spectacular catastrophe, but a narrowing corridor of options that finally closed over open water. But certainty is difficult when the aircraft itself was never conclusively found. In historical mysteries, absence does not stay quiet, it invites alternatives. One enduring alternative proposed that Earhart and Noonan may have reached land somewhere else in the Pacific, rather than crashing directly near Howland. This idea gained strength from the simple fact that in survival narratives, a missed destination does not always mean immediate loss. It can mean drift, improvisation, and unintended landfall. Over the decades, that possibility evolved into various castaway theories, each trying to explain why no confirmed aircraft was recovered and why the story remained open. Some later claims pointed to islands far from Howland. Others tried to link scattered artifacts and remembered sightings to Earhart's final hours. Those theories remain compelling partly because they preserve a final human chapter. Not immediate loss over water, but endurance after the planned route had failed. Yet the farther a theory moves from the known radio record and navigational problem near Howland, the more carefully it has to be judged. That is where the Earhart mystery becomes especially revealing. It is not simply a puzzle of disappearance. It is a struggle between evidence, imagination, and the desire for a recoverable ending. Public fascination also changed the case. Amelia Earhart was not an obscure pilot lost on a routine route. She was already a global figure, and that made silence harder to accept. Her disappearance became larger than an aviation accident. It became a national wound, a modern legend, and a permanent opening for speculation. Over time, more elaborate theories appeared. Capture, secret missions, hidden survival, even identity change. Most offered drama in proportion to their distance from evidence. That pattern is familiar in unresolved history. When the core answer is missing, narrative pressure pushes outward, filling the silence with possibilities of every kind. But even stripped of myth, the original story is powerful enough. Two experienced flyers crossed a vast ocean toward a tiny island and vanished just short of certainty. There is no need to exaggerate that. The scale of the route, the weakness of 1930s communication, and the final radio fragments already carry their own dread. The last phase of the mystery lives in a narrow corridor between Ley, Howland, and the ocean around them. A corridor charted by estimates, signals, and hope. And that is why the case still endures. It combines fame, technical challenge, missing evidence, and one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. The ocean does not preserve stories in a form convenient to history. It scatters them, submerges them, and leaves later generations to reconstruct meaning from fragments. In that sense, Earhart's disappearance belongs to a larger tradition of modern exploration, where technology expanded human reach faster than certainty could follow. Flight had made the world smaller, but not small enough. There were still spaces where a machine could vanish, a message could fail, and a destination could remain invisible. That contrast is part of what makes Earhart feel so modern. The disappearance happened in an age of radios, engines, headlines, and coordinated search, yet still escaped final explanation. We know where the final journey began. We know what messages were heard. We know who waited at Howland. but the final descent from record into silence has never fully closed. Perhaps that is the true force of the mystery. Not that it invites fantasy, but that it shows how thin the line can be between near success and irreversible loss. Amelia Earhart set out to circle the world, and instead entered history through an absence no search has completely resolved. The achievement survived. The answer did not. And so the last flight remains suspended over the Pacific. A route, a voice, a missed island, and a silence large enough to outlast generations.